They forced me to choose between pleasing my family or protecting my daughter. I chose to be the father she deserves. I'm Fernando, a 34-year-old engineer, and until recently, my life revolved around my adopted daughter, Alice. I raised her from the age of 2 when I took her from an orphanage and brought her into my world. At that time, I felt like I had finally found my true purpose in life. She was the light that illuminated my path, and I felt complete, even with all the difficulties I faced to be the best father she could have. However, there was a shadow that loomed over us, my family. Whenever I tried to reach out to them with Alice, there was an atmosphere of rejection. To my parents, she was never really my daughter, just an adopted child, and that was always evident. At first, I tried not to mind the lack of acceptance. I was so focused on caring for Alice and building a solid life for us both that I thought the love I gave her was enough. But over time, my family's behavior became clearer and more painful. They always preferred my biological nieces, the sweethearts, the darlings of the family. Worst of all were the disgusted looks, the way they talked about Alice without her realizing it, and once again, how she was treated differently simply because she wasn't blood-related. I couldn't accept that my daughter would be ignored for something so ridiculous. Things began to worsen when Alice, just 6 years old, began to notice she was being treated differently. It was one afternoon when I caught her in my parents' garden, crying as I tried to hide from her grandparents' cruel gaze. She couldn't understand why the other grandchildren were playing freely while she had to wash dishes alone, with her grandparents' eyes fixed on her. I tried to hide it, but the pain on her face was the last straw. At that moment, I realized my daughter was suffering, and my frustration with my parents turned to anger. I knew I had to protect Alice, even if it meant permanently cutting ties with my own family. I remember the day I made the decision that would change everything. It wasn't easy. It was like cutting off a piece of myself. I decided I would no longer provide financial support to my parents. They, who had always depended on me to maintain their home and comfortable life, now found themselves with nothing. I knew I was doing the right thing, but inside, I felt like a traitor. My parents began emotionally blackmailing me, telling me I was being ungrateful, that they had given me life and that I was destroying the family. But at the same time, I realized that all I was doing was protecting my daughter, and in my mind, that was more important than any blood relationship. The weight of guilt was crushing. I found myself in a constant internal battle, wondering if I had made the right choice. Alice didn't understand the situation in all its complexity. She only knew that her grandparents didn't like her, and that hurt her in ways I couldn't imagine. Seeing my daughter suffering like this affected me in a way I had never felt before. I wanted to protect her from everything, even the pain of growing up with the feeling of rejection. When Alice looked at me with those innocent eyes, I felt immense pressure to do the right thing. And for a moment, I felt the weight of the world on my shoulders. But even as the guilt gnawed at me, I realized something important. I was doing this for her, and that gave me the strength to keep going. I couldn't allow my daughter to be treated like a stranger in my own family. I loved her more than anything in the world, and the only thing I wanted was to ensure she grew up in an environment where she was loved and respected, regardless of her background. During those difficult days, I remember every look on her face, every smile she gave me when I hugged her and told her everything would be okay. This unconditional love was what kept me going, even in the moments when I wanted to give up. When my decision was finalized and I truly severed financial ties with my parents, things didn't get better. In fact, they got worse. I was cast as the villain. My entire family abandoned me. It wasn't just about money. It was about them not understanding why I was doing this. They thought I was being selfish, that I was overreacting. The pressure was immense, but the anger I felt toward them was even greater. I could no longer be complicit in a system that perpetuated hatred and exclusion. I had a commitment to Alice, and nothing else mattered. The following weeks were the most difficult of my life. I found myself isolated, with no one to support me other than Alice. It was during this time that I began to realize the strength she possessed within herself. Alice, just 6 years old, already knew things were difficult, but she also knew that as long as we were together, nothing could separate us. Sometimes she would say things that made me reflect deeply, like, "Daddy, we have everything we need, and that's more important than anything else." Her words were my motivation to keep going. I realized that with Alice's love, I didn't need anyone else to keep going. Little by little, I began rebuilding my routine with Alice. I dedicated myself even more to my work, but still prioritized my time with her. I began creating our own special moments, picnics on Sundays, movie nights on Friday nights, and even cooking classes on Saturdays. The intention was one: to show her that the world could be kind, that she could be loved unconditionally. It wasn't easy, because there were times when the absence of family hit hard, both for me and for her. But in those moments, I forced myself to remember the reason for it all: to protect my daughter, to show her that she was no less than anyone else. Of course, I had moments of weakness. There were days when I wondered if I'd done the right thing, if I wasn't depriving Alice of a larger family, of cousins, aunts, uncles, grandparents. I had anxiety attacks at night, lying in bed, wondering if one day she'd blame me for pushing everyone away. But deep down, I knew the kind of family she lost was never really family to her. It was a toxic illusion that would only have undermined her self-esteem and made her grow up feeling like she had to constantly prove herself. I didn't want Alice to carry wounds that took me years to overcome. Little by little, I began to realize how much the absence of that family was good for us. Alice began to smile more, to feel more confident. She was no longer afraid to play, to express herself. I began to notice small changes that moved me. She no longer cried when she was contradicted. She no longer hid when visitors came home. She felt safe, comfortable, and that's when I truly understood what it meant to protect a child. Sometimes protecting also means nipping at the root of everything that causes harm, even if it hurts at first. One of the moments that most impacted me was at a school meeting when the teacher praised Alice for her behavioral improvement. She said that Alice had become a more engaged, more confident, and happier child. She didn't know the details of our personal lives, but she said to me, "Fernando, you're doing an excellent job." That broke me down inside. It was as if all the weight I'd been carrying began to dissipate. I returned home that night feeling that I was finally on the right path, and that my daughter was flourishing, far from the shadow of those who didn't know how to love her. Over time, Alice began to make new friends. I encouraged her to take dance and drawing classes, and I saw a light in her that I hadn't seen before. She was no longer ashamed to say she was adopted, nor did she compare herself to other children. She proudly called herself Daddy's girl. And that, for me, was everything. I could tell she had matured, and that our little family, just the two of us, was more than enough. It was a family built on love and respect, without hypocrisy or appearances. The pain of rejection fueled me to be an even better father. Instead of martyring myself for what Alice lost, I began to dedicate myself to what she was gaining: a safe home, a happy childhood, and the certainty that she would always have a father by her side. I realized that often what we call family is just a title, and real family is the people who love you, who support you, who make you feel valued. And I was determined to build that environment for my daughter, even if it was just the two of us against the world. One day, many months after the breakup with my family, my mother tried to get in touch. She texted me saying she missed her granddaughter and wanted to see her. At that moment, I felt a whirlwind of emotions, but I responded with complete composure. Missing her is built with presence and respect. Alice isn't a toy to be ignored when it's not convenient. If you want to see her, you'll have to treat her like a granddaughter with love and equality. The response was silence, and it was at that moment that I knew it wasn't me who had abandoned my family. It was they who never accepted the daughter I chose to love. After that, I never again doubted my decision. I continued my life alongside my daughter with much more ease, much more truth. Alice didn't have grandparents present, nor fawning uncles, but she had a whole father, willing to face anything for her. And I felt more whole than ever, because I had finally chosen the right side of history, the side of love, respect, and protection, even if it meant standing alone against the world. Over time, other doors began to open for us. We met incredible neighbors, co-workers who became true friends, and even some families from Alice's school who welcomed us into their circle. For the first time in years, I realized what it was like to live surrounded by people who rooted for our happiness without judgment or prejudice. Alice felt welcomed, and so did I. That's when I understood that life gives us opportunities to build new bonds, lighter, more sincere bonds. Those people didn't need to be blood ties to love my daughter and support me. I became much more selective about who I allowed into our lives. I didn't want Alice to grow up in toxic environments, nor around people who pretended to like her just for appearances. I preferred quality over quantity. Close friends became our little extended family. Every birthday, I made a point of surrounding her with people who genuinely loved her, who treated her like any other child. And every time I saw her smile, I knew it was the best choice I could have made. I also learned to heal my own wounds. For a long time, I felt frustrated that I didn't have the support of my family when I needed it most. But with therapy, reading, and a lot of reflection, I was able to transform that pain into growth. I understood that, in life, sometimes we need to close some doors to breathe, to find peace. And I needed peace to raise my daughter the right way. I began to practice detachment from what hurt me, to stop seeking approval from those who would never make an effort to understand my choice. This was liberating. Alice grew up free from judgment, surrounded by love, and above all, aware of her own worth. I always made a point of teaching her that she was enough, that she was loved, that she was strong. Over time, she understood that it wasn't she who had been rejected, but rather that some people choose to live trapped in prejudices that aren't worth it. The sparkle in her eyes, her self-confidence, and the way she embraced her own story showed me every day that my choice was bearing fruit, and I was filled with pride. I never again accepted emotional blackmail or family pressure. I built solid boundaries and learned to respect them. There were times when family members tried to get closer, but I always made it clear, my daughter came first. There would be no more room for humiliation or deceit. And the strangest thing was realizing that without that toxicity, my own mental health improved. I started sleeping better, smiling more, and having more patience in my daily life. Alice's presence and the lightness of our new life were transformative. Today, looking back, I'm proud of everything I faced. It wasn't easy, it wasn't quick, and it wasn't painless, but I would choose it all over again. Cutting ties was painful, but necessary. I understood that being a father means protecting not only physically, but emotionally. We can't allow our children to grow up in environments that make them feel small. And when I look at Alice now, strong, happy, full of dreams, I feel an enormous peace within me. I know I did the best for her. Many people think that overcoming adversity means winning major external battles, but I discovered that the hardest battles are the internal ones. Overcoming guilt, insecurity, and fear of rejection were the greatest challenges of my life, and it was precisely in these internal battles that I grew the most. I became a stronger man, a more conscientious father, and above all, someone who doesn't accept less than his daughter deserves. The overcoming wasn't quick, but it was true. And in the end, that's what matters. My life changed completely after that breakup. I gained an even more confident daughter, a more relaxed life, and I finally understood the true meaning of family. Today I say, without fear, family isn't blood. It's those who are present, those who respect and love unconditionally. And if you're going through something similar, I have some advice. Don't be afraid to cut ties that make you or those you love feel less than. It hurts at first, but in the long run, peace is worth it. I'm living proof of that, and I've never been happier and more at peace than I am today.